It had been days since Pope Leo XIV made the call. He had spoken gently, almost apologetically, to Maria Elena Bergoglio, sister of Pope Francis, asking if she might come to Rome one final time. Not for ceremony, he had said, but because something holy remains unfinished. She had not hesitated. And now, standing once again inside the apostolic palace, Maria Elena was holding something close to her chest, a faded scarf that once belonged to her brother, still faintly scented with mate and wood smoke. The Pope greeted her without formality. No cameras. No curia. Only family. He took her hand in both of his. He spoke of you often, Leo said softly, in the quiet moments when titles fell away. She nodded, eyes already moist. He used to say, she smiled faintly, that if holiness didn't begin with your siblings, it probably wasn't holiness at all. They both laughed gently. And then, they heard the soft padding of paws against marble. Tiberius entered the room slowly, tail low, body cautious, until his eyes met hers. For a moment, time folded. He tilted his head, sniffed the air, then approached. She knelt, and Tiberius leaned into her chest, not with hesitation, but with recognition. He remembers, Leo whispered. Of course he does, she replied, embracing the dog with tears running freely now. Some loves don't need reminders. Just presence. And in that holy silence, the question neither of them dared speak began to rise. Would he return to Argentina with her? Or had he already chosen where his heart belonged? The sun had begun its gentle descent, casting long golden shadows across the Vatican gardens. It was Leo XIV's idea to hold the meeting there, not in a hall, not in an office, but in the quiet heart of nature, where truth felt freer to speak. A simple wooden bench had been placed beneath an olive tree. Around it stood no more than 6 people: the Pope, Maria Elena, 2 aides, a priest, and a quiet handler holding Tiberius by a loose silk leash, though he didn't tug or strain. He stood watching. The moment felt more like a farewell than a decision. The Pope gestured for Maria Elena to sit, and he joined her, removing his ring before folding his hands in his lap. I called you here, Leo began, because I couldn't make this choice for him. She nodded slowly. I've wrestled with it too, she admitted. At first, I thought I should take him, bring him back to the homeland, to our family. She looked at Tiberius, who sat attentively just feet away. But the more I looked at him, the more I wondered if maybe this is his family now. The Pope listened, hands still, face open. She continued, you don't need to love someone less to know that their home might not be where you are. Leo took a breath, eyes locked on Tiberius. He doesn't speak, but he's told us both something, hasn't he? Maria Elena smiled sadly. Yes. He told us by staying by Jorge's grave. By not running. He's already made the choice neither of us dared say aloud. The Pope turned to her. Then let us say it now. Not as masters, but as friends to a soul who deserves the dignity of choice. They both stood. And as the evening breeze moved through the olive branches above them, the moment of truth drew near. The handler released the leash. Tiberius stood between them now, his soft eyes moving from Maria Elena to Leo XIV and back again. No commands were given. No gestures were made. Only silence. A silence filled with love pulling in 2 directions, yet without a trace of competition. Maria Elena knelt, opening her arms slowly, scarf still wrapped around her wrist. If you want to come home, mi amor, she said softly, I will take you there. To where you first met Jorge. To where he first carried you. Tiberius took a slow step forward. Her eyes shimmered. I'll love you just the same. You don't have to stay to honor him. Behind them, the Pope stood motionless. But inside him, something ached, an ache that had no name. He didn't want to ask the dog to stay. But part of him had begun to hope that he wouldn't be left behind again. Still, he stayed silent. Tiberius sniffed the scarf, leaned his head gently toward her chest, rested it there. For a moment, she whispered to him in Spanish, words no one else could hear. Then she pulled back. It's okay, she said through tears, you can go if you need to. And she stepped away. Now it was Leo's turn to kneel. But he didn't speak. He only opened his hand. A hand that said nothing, but welcomed everything. Tiberius turned toward him. His ears twitched. And in the space between memory and belonging, he chose. Tiberius moved, slowly at first. One paw. Then another. Then another. He crossed the grass, walked past Maria Elena's outstretched arms, and stopped in front of Leo XIV. And then, with a quiet sigh, he curled up beside him, pressing his body against the white robes of the Pope, resting his head just above Leo's foot. The entire garden stood still. Not a bird chirped. Not a branch moved. The choice had been made. Not with words. Not with explanations. But with the same kind of quiet love that had once kept Tiberius lying beside a tomb for 9 days, waiting. Leo XIV lowered himself to the ground beside the dog, placing his hand gently over Tiberius' back. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He closed his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. Maria Elena stepped forward slowly. There were tears on her cheeks, but they weren't of grief. They were of understanding. "He belongs to Jorge," she said softly. "And Jorge belongs here." She knelt, pressing a kiss to Tiberius' forehead. "You chose well, mi fiel amigo." And with that, the conflict vanished. There were no regrets. No jealousy. Only peace. Because in letting Tiberius choose, they had all been reminded of a deeper truth: love, when it is real, never needs to be claimed. It simply reveals where it already lives. They left the garden gate open. Intentionally. Symbolically. If Tiberius had wanted to leave, to run, to chase ascent back to another continent, he could have. But he didn't. He stayed. Not because he was told to. Not because he was trained. Because he had chosen. Leo XIV sat beside him on the grass as the sun dipped behind St. Peter's dome. The dog's breathing slowed, his body relaxed, his eyes closed, not in sleep, but in complete trust. A few staff members stood in the distance, watching with their hands over their mouths. One whispered, "He's guarding him now, the way he once guarded Francisco." Another nodded. "No. He's doing more than guarding. He's loving." For Leo XIV, the open gate wasn't just for Tiberius. It was a mirror. He realized that so much of his first days as Pope had been about grasping, trying to hold on to legacy, trying to be enough, trying not to lose the humility he had promised to protect. But this was different. This was freedom in the shape of fidelity. True love doesn't follow you because it must, he thought. It stays because it recognizes home. And in that moment, the Pope did something he hadn't done since his election. He wept. Not from pain, but from the quiet beauty of knowing. He was no longer alone. By now the sun had nearly vanished. The last light spilled golden across the stones of the Vatican garden, casting a soft halo around the Pope and the dog beside him. No one dared speak. Even the leaves seemed to hush themselves. And then, Tiberius lifted his head. He stood, turned toward Maria Elena, still seated beneath the olive tree, and walked to her. He rested his head on her lap one last time. She smiled through tears, brushing his ears gently. "I will tell the family," she whispered, "that you are safe, that you stayed close, not to Rome but to Jorge." Then she kissed his forehead. "And that's where you belong." Tiberius stepped away from her, returned to the Pope, and lay down beside him once more. At that moment, a Vatican photographer, present by silent request of Leo himself, snapped a single photo. The Pope. The dog. The open gate behind them. The olive tree where the sister sat smiling. No title. No explanation. Just truth. That photograph would become an icon. Not of papal power. Not of tradition. But of uncomplicated love choosing to remain. And for those who saw it in the days that followed, on screens, in papers, in hearts, it became clear, something holy had happened. And it hadn't needed words. Just a choice. As the final rays disappeared, Leo XIV sat in silence, his hand resting gently on the back of Tiberius. No one expected him to speak. But then his voice rose, quiet, raw, and steady. "We are taught as leaders to hold, to lead, to decide." He paused, eyes fixed on the open gate, now painted in dusk's blue shadow. "But today I learned something else, that sometimes the greatest act of love is to let go." He turned to Maria. "Elena, I brought you here to give him a choice. But I realize now, he wasn't the only one who chose. I had to choose too. To release without fear. To love without holding." The small group gathered closer. The Pope placed his other hand over his heart. "Francis taught us to kneel. Tiberius reminded me to trust. And you, he said, looking at Maria Elena, reminded me that love never seeks to own, only to honor. Tears rolled down his face, but he didn't hide them. He let them fall like prayer, not weakness. Tiberius leaned his head into his chest, sealing a vow without words. And Leo whispered, barely audible, "Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for staying close to him, by staying close to me." Then, rising slowly, he turned to the others and spoke one final truth. "We speak often of thrones and crowns, but the most sacred place is not above, it's beside. Love is not a command. It's an invitation and a letting go." The olive branches above them rustled softly. Maria Elena nodded through her tears. And as she turned to leave Rome once more, she did so with a peaceful heart, knowing that Jorge was still loved, still remembered, still alive in the heart of the one who chose to stay. To love deeply is not to hold tighter. It is to open the gate and be grateful when love stays anyway. And so it was. Tiberius remained. And the Vatican was no longer just a palace. It had become a home.